This is DUNE TALK, a DUNENewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey there, welcome to the show. As the countdown continues to the release of Dune Part 2, we're zooming in on two of the women who will play key roles in the second movie, Princess Irulan and Chani, a young warrior leader of the Fremen. What were they up to in the years before the events of Dune? Yes, we're doing a book review. This is Marcus, your editor at DUNENewsNet.com, and I'm here with two other absolute Dune experts. Mark, thanks for joining us again from the UK.
Hi, great to be back. Lots of exciting Dune news going on this week in the run up to part 2 and some book reviews as well. So excited to join you.
Great, and we're happy to have Rachel appearing on Dune Talk for the first time. She's led or co-hosted various long-running podcasts, including one about Robin Hood's Real Eldlings and another one on Game of Thrones. Rachel, welcome. I want to give you the opportunity to tell all of our viewers and listeners a bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about Princess of Dune. I am a longtime book podcaster, so happy to talk about my favorite books in the world, Dune. No one ever wants to talk to me about Dune. You can find me on the internet at Darth Rachel, and you may know me because I made a guild rep cosplay.
And Rachel, I'm curious to hear more about your Dune story. What got you to this amazing universe?
Like many, I discovered Dune when I was in middle school, which I think is a really formative time to read the book. And I just loved it. It was the perfect mix of weird and cool. And I've always loved science fiction, and it just caught me, right? The evocative, nature of Dune, the planet as a character, and how it's just sort of perfectly fits every kind of moment of my life in a weird way, whether it's going through something difficult, right? When I tell myself, oh, just go through the litany of fear. In fact, I have it tattooed on my arm. Um, so, it's always struck me as an amazing story. And I read it every year, actually.
Yeah, and you pointed out the guild's been outfit behind you. And
Yeah.
people may have seen you appear at various conventions. How was that whole experience, and how did you put together that?
So it's funny because I made a still suit like many did. But the second I saw Denis, part 1, the 2 minutes that these guys are on stage, I thought, oh gosh, it would be really cool to make a space pope. So it was kind of like a dream. And then my partner and I were like, you know what, let's just do it. It can't be that hard. And then we have a friend online you can find at Super Daft Brothers who helped us make the helmet file, and then we modified it. I made all the soft parts. It was really fun. It's really difficult, especially if you don't have a vacuum form table, which I didn't. Um, so I had to send that out to my friends to get the actual dome made. But I dyed it, painted it, attached it to the helmet. And yeah, it was really fun. And people don't expect you to be able to make something like that, right? Because it didn't really exist in real life. Like even the dome wasn't yellow in real life. So it was nice to bring something to life that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, looks really amazing. Well done. Yeah, I'm sure
Thank
was
you.
really impressive to see you walk through the convention.
It's super fun. Yeah. Because people really react. Even if they don't know what it is, they run up to you to ask you what it is. And then you can tell them about Dune.
Hopefully, we'll get to see more of them in part 2.
Yes.
So more
I'm
people
hoping
will be
for
familiar with
navigator
them.
glimpses.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're also going to touch on the guild in our review today as well. So yeah, that's great. Let's go ahead and dive into Princess of Dune.
The DUNEVERSE, books, comics, games, collectibles, and more.
Mentioned today, we're reviewing the book Princess of Dune. It's the latest entry into the expanded universe written by Brian Herbert and Kevin G. Anderson, published by Tor Books this past October. This is a fully standalone prequel story. It's set around 2 years before the events of Dune, making for a timely tie into the ongoing movies. So let's first kick things off with overall thoughts and reactions to the books, things that maybe stood out to you overall. And there won't be spoilers in the first part of this episode. So, Mark, I know that you read the book much earlier than the rest of us with early review copy. So I'll let you kick things off.
Yeah, thanks. So one thing I've often said about the various prequels and midquels and interquels that we've had is there's a lot of focus on House Atreides, and we've got this entire universe of interesting people and events, and we're always focused on the Skywalker saga kind of thing. So it was refreshing to actually have a book where the word Atreides is only mentioned once in the entire book. And I've always liked Princess Irulan, particularly in the miniseries with Julie Cox. So to have a book where she's one of the central characters, along with Chani as well, I was really happy that we are branching out a little bit, not too far, but it isn't just House Harkonnen and House Atreides battling for the Empire. Rachel, what were your thoughts on the book?
I actually agree. I was going to say the same thing. It was nice to read a book where the Atreides were not centered in the story at all. I mean, we still get Princess Irulan, and we still have all of these tantalizing plot points that point to further, adventures and contact with the Atreides. But they're sort of an invisible presence in this novel, and we do get to see more people, more plot lines that sort of swirl around that central storyline.
Yeah, and I think for me it was great to see a bit about the lore, like of course those two characters, because when we're in Dune, we're introduced to Chani, and we don't see much of what happened before Paul meets her. Of course, in the movie we got to see a bit more of that, and then Princess Irulan, we're seeing her narration throughout the story. We're seeing like at the beginning of the chapters, but we don't actually see her like in person, I guess, until the end of the movie. So it's good to see those characters, what their normal everyday lives were like in those years before, and also a lot more of the court intrigue on Kaiti, because that's also something we get to see it from here from a distance, and like get pictures of there are things happening, and it's like an amazing world, but we don't actually see the day to day, like the interaction between the royal princesses, how they act together as sisters, what their relationship with their father. So I really enjoyed all interaction on Kaiten, and we also got to see more of the guild as well.
I loved all the scenes with Irulan and all of her sisters because, we get to sort of see them as adults later in the series, but it's nice to get like a look at how they interacted sort of before they are fully formed, players on the board. I
Yeah,
really
there's a
enjoyed that.
lot of later on in the books we get a lot of more sibling rivalry between
Yeah.
uh, the sisters, and so it's nice to see, as you say, that family life, if you can call it a family,
Yeah.
um, before the events of June.
Yeah, for example, we got to see like more of Wensicia, and like her interaction with Irulan, and of course she's going to be like only appear several books down the line, but she also plays a key role there. So it's interesting to see this backstory, and how that there was also rivalry between the two sisters. That was intriguing.
Yeah, and it's lovely that they were not set up immediately as like antagonists towards each other. Like each you kind of understand the decisions each of them made. So it's not as if Wensicia is automatically a villain. So that was cool. I liked that. I was prepared for her to just kind of stroll onto the stage as like an arch villain. But she actually was really amusing and fun to read about.
I like the setup of the decay of the empire. That's something that in the sequel books, they've explored more about how Shaddam has kind of let his imperial might sort of in the military run to ruin a little bit with imperial favors, and we actually see that play out as an important plot point in the book. So that was kind of nice to tie in those threads that have been developed in the House Atreides, House Harkonnen prequel novels, and actually have that have some impact into the storyline.
And also, without giving too much away, how something like that could happen. Because, when you think about the ultimate control that Shaddam has over the empire, and, the kind of hand in hand walking that they do with the guild and all of the rules, it's like, how could any of this happen? How could anybody even try to rebel or think to rebel. And it's nice that it kind of gives us a plausible path for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting angles into like how the military is set up, because of course we know that the Emperor controls the Sardaukar, and they're the most feared fighting force in the galaxy. But apparently the whole military isn't like that. So there's a lot of like lesser sections of the military, and people who have gained their rank, maybe who weren't as deserving of their titles. So that's also explored here in the book.
And also just a little bit of a taste of space fighting,
Mhm.
which I loved.
Yeah, that's something we don't see a lot of in most of the
No.
story.
No, we don't. I mean, I think that, like, I'm trying to remember. I haven't read the Butlerian Jihad in a long time, but I feel like there's some scenes like that in that novel. Um, but yeah, it's nice to just kind of like, oh yeah, this is like ships in space fighting. That's cool.
Yeah, we don't really get an awful lot of sci-fi battles in Frank Herbert's novels, and that's certainly something that the prequel and newer novels have expanded on into sort of more traditional sci-fi epic space battles and large
Yeah.
armies.
Yeah, so we're going to go into more details into the events of the book, and toward the end, we're going to get into the conclusion and all that. But I guess to give an indication, I would say that this book really works well. I say it's best after someone has read the book Dune, because then you'll appreciate the characters more, and like that you're getting those insights into them. Having said that, if you're someone who's reading or watching the movies and you haven't yet read the book, this could work as a tie-in to the movies as well. So the first topic that I wanted to dive into is that we see a lot of Chani and Irulan in this book, and as mentioned, like much more than we saw in the original novel. So Rachel, in terms of the characters were portrayed, what did you think of the way that we got to see them like in the personal day-to-day lives?
Yeah, it was great. As Mark said, we don't really get to see much of Irulan in the first Dune novel. She comes into her own in later Dune novels, and then if you've seen the 2000s miniseries, which I love, it's great. You get a little bit more of an expansion of her character, so it's really nice to see her centered in the novel and not just as an accessory or a pawn or someone who interacts with Paul and the rest of the Atreides family. She has her own inner motivations, her own goals in life. And she's been brought up under extreme pressures, in the court on Kaitain. And she's aware that her father is probably not, at the tippity top of his abilities. He's letting things slip. And she knows that, and she's in line for the throne. So she's got goals. And I really liked that. I think honestly, I could read a whole novel just about Irulan.
Yeah, and on the there's some nice sort of similarities between Irulan and Chani as well, because they're both sort of fighting against their father's expectations of them. So Chani, her father, Liet Kynes, wants her to follow on in his footsteps as the ecologist of Dune, and so Chani, that's not something that she sees as being a true Fremen. And likewise, Irulan is fighting against her own father, who really wants a son. That's all Shaddam wants. And so Irulan isn't meeting his expectations. And so, Irulan wants to do more. She can do more. She got all these skill sets, but she's sort of brushed aside in the imperial politics. And that sort of mirroring of conflicts between the two, even though they're from opposite ends of the Imperium and stuff like that, they're really fighting very similar personal battles.
Absolutely. The daughter as sort of an underestimated tool for an ambitious father is such a great, I'm going to say the word trope, but I'm very trope positive. I love a good trope. And I think it's great that, we're seeing the different ways that Chani and Irulan can go against those expectations and still sort of use the tools that they've learned by trying to meet those expectations to do their own plot lines. For example, it's always sort of been a little bit of maybe a plot hole. It's like, why isn't Chani like the next in line to be the Imperial planetologist? Why is she a Fremen fighter? Um, if her parent is so highly ranked. So it's nice to see why that is true and what she's learned and what she's been up to on Dune before the Harkonnens leave. And then the same thing with Irulan. She's also sort of underutilized in that first novel. It's like we know that she's the one that's sort of writing down everything and giving us her point of view of how it all works in this giant puzzle. Uh, and it's nice that they both get to be smart and tough, uh, violent on occasion. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some interesting parallels between their two stories, but at the same time, Chani is much younger in the advance of the book, so she's only 14-year-old when this is happening. So it's so relatable because I guess she's getting the pressure from other people her own age, and like saying like, oh, your father, he's part of the Imperium as well, and he's not a true Fremen. That's actually said by her half brother a few times. And then she's also, like weighing, okay, like she does love her father and she wants to live up to his name, but like at the same time, she wants to be a true friend. And so there's that conflict within her. And it's exactly that age, right? It's really relatable that she's going through all this confusion and, like, what does she want for herself?
It's similar, but in some ways opposite as well, because Irulan wants to follow in her father's footsteps. She wants to be emperor effectively. And Chani doesn't want to follow in her father's footsteps, but they're both sort of fighting against the expectations.
And both running headlong into what we know, because well, I've read the rest of the books. So I know like how close both of them are to essentially the center of the universe and the center of the main plot, and how much power they ultimately wield and don't wield, and how that relationship between the two of them. Because it's really great that they sort of almost cross paths multiple times, um, just because it's great foreshadowing.
Yeah, the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have done quite a clever dance, because we know that they don't meet in June.
Yeah.
We know that they've never met before in the events of June, and yet we want them to meet and we want their paths to cross, and it seems almost inevitable. And there's always, there's never a face-to-face confrontation between them, even though they both influence the life of the other person through their own actions.
And I
But
appreciate
we
that.
never get to any sort of contradictions from the original novel.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because they are doing a dance, in KJ and Brian, because they know that we know, right? We've read all these books, and they've written 20 extra novels to kind of beef up all of this lore, some of which is a little bit contradictory, but they're also writing a novel for someone who may be new to the universe. And so they don't hit you over the head with the foreshadowing or, those connections to, I think there's definite references to House Carino and House Atreides, the House books, which came out many years ago. And then other, I think, like of the more recent prequel novels. So that's really cool. I really enjoyed how it wasn't so heavy-handed. Like you could be a completely new reader and have never read any of those books before and read this book, and it's fine. Like you're not confused, because I haven't read every single one of the prequel novels.
Yeah, I've admitted that like I only got back into the doing novels, like catching up with things like a couple of years back. So I haven't read all the prequel novels. So I read the House trilogy and the the more recent novels, the Caladan trilogy, and then this one, and they do fit together. I know that there have been somebody saying, thinking, okay, like there's a lot going on in those years, but it makes sense because it's like it's a huge universe. There's like billions of worlds, things going on all over the place, and the emperor and these houses, they're really at the center of it. So it makes sense that there's a lot of turmoil and like various things going on, especially on not only in the wider scale, but also within the families as these children are going from teenagerhood into adulthood.
I wanted to draw a sort of connection to architecture. So we know how Dune is always like a character. The planet Dune is always a character. But there's also this great use of architecture as character. So, when we're on Kaitain, we're in the palace. So there's always this feeling that you're just down the hall and in another room from another major conversation or another major plot point that you may have read about in another book or that you know is happening concurrently to this. And the same thing happens on Dune when all these characters end up, in the Fenrig's house, right? And they're just off stage, they're just down the hall, they're just in another room. And I love that because we know that place is really important in Dune, and not just as like a setting, right, or as a symbol, but as literal like plot plot movement. Because knowledge is power. So you have a character who's it's like Fenring knows all this stuff, right? And he kind of comes in and out of the narrative very loosely. And you know he knows things, but he's not saying it in the room that you're in with the characters that you're following. Um, so that's cool. I really like I thought it was very well kind of woven, and the use of the spaces that they created. Not as much maybe description of what things look like, although I really enjoyed getting the descriptions of Kitane. Um, and like also of the souk market that they have to run through at one point in the other plot line. Yeah, it's cool.
That's interesting to see the through line of Count Benry and Lady Morgothry, because they've been expanded on like since that first House trilogy that they wrote, and you see that the story continues to progress. And he is an important character, like he and Margot, and yeah, it's great to see that their story develop over time. That they're not just like a one time appearance in a Dune novel, but now we really get to see more
Yeah,
about
and their
them.
absence is felt, right? Like
Yeah.
just like because you're either in their house or you're in their office, and they are in both It's great. It's like they cross over into both point of views, I should say, because it's Chani's point of view and Irulan's point of view. Uh, and I really enjoyed that.
The other difference that I wanted to call out, like between Chani and Princess Irulan, is as mentioned, Chani is young, so she's an early teen, and on the other hand, Princess Irulan, she's already 26 years old at this time, and she has an ambition. She wants to become the emperor. She wants to get married. She wants to know like who's going to be like the person who she's going to be married to, or like what position that's going to put her in. But like in her case, the emperor is putting things off. Like he's holding her as almost a bargaining chip to see the maximum he can get out of her in terms of an alliance, or like the most strategic marriage that he can get out of there. So like there have been many people who have proposed marriage to her, like, and we're going to get into one of them in the book. But yeah, it's interesting. So she still has at 26, she still doesn't have a full view of like what's coming up, like what lies ahead for her future.
But it's you can't really blame the Emperor on that because, or to cast him in a bad light, because if you think about Duke Leto, he was exactly the same. He wasn't getting married. He was keeping Jessica as a concubine because he wanted that bargaining chip for himself, for House Atreides, on a potential alliance with another house. So you can fully understand where the Emperor was coming from. And if the Emperor's in the wrong, then Duke Leto's in the wrong as well.
Point, like you might even think that Irulan is a tempting bride for Leto. If he has those ambitions, then that may be a good choice, but a scary choice maybe for Shaddam. But for Leto, that would have been a great move.
So let's get into some of the new characters from this book. So early in the book, we were introduced to the character of Moko Zenya, and he's a name that we haven't heard before. And he basically walks into the throne room. He has requested an audience with Shaddam, and Shaddam at first he's thinking, okay, like why should I give him an audience? But Zenya has a really exemplary military record. Unlike a lot of the novels, like he's actually earned his rank through distinguishment in battle. And then he comes flat out and he says that he wants to ask for Princess Irulan's hand in marriage. That was a pretty surprising moment right in the novel.
That actually made me laugh because you don't see. That's one of the things that I didn't see coming at all. He's got something planned, but that's like the audacity of that move. And you can just imagine, silence in the Imperial throne room. It was hearing a pin drop.
Yeah, no, the audacity of Moko is his main character trait, I think.
Mhm.
Just every single thing he did, I'd be like, "Oh, sure, you're gonna get away with this, maybe. I don't know. What makes you think you can do this?" He just like would. He just kept getting away
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, he's a really interesting character. I think even towards the end of the novel, I was like, try to understand, like, what's driving him in some ways. I mean, like some of his motivation that is explained, but there are still some things even towards the end. It was like, like, why did you approach it that way? But yeah, it's interesting because he sort of represents, as you were alluding to earlier, Mark, that corruption within the uh, within the imperial military, and that a lot of people have gained their ranks just through their noble status, and they're maybe not necessarily competent or the best people in the job, and there's a lot of tension because then you have these, I guess, these second line officers who are they're the ones who are actually doing the work and like keeping the Imperium safe, and they're the ones who are competent, but they're not getting the recognition, and they're sometimes even being put in dangerous situations. Their leaders.
Because of incompetent leadership, yes. And actually, I thought that Moko was an amazing character because he doesn't appear anywhere else, so they could have a lot of fun with him and make him do things and go places and talk to people, and it didn't really impact that kind of like center lore, canon. And I also thought he struck me as like a really good character if you were going to like role play any of the Dune games, because he's the son of a poor noble house, so he has like a little bit of rank, a little bit of education, a lot of ambition, and but he's still like a working person in the Imperium. He doesn't just kind of live off his laurels. He makes good decisions. He got promotions. He has people who are loyal to him, and he feels that he should be rewarded for the work that he has done. And then his reactions to maybe not getting the the rewards that he requested is fun. It's just like a how much can you piss off the emperor? Like,
Yeah, it's as you say, he doesn't appear anywhere else, so that they've got some freedom with him. But it's also one of the sort of the traps of a prequel novel or midquel novel is the board has to be reset the end of the plot line, so you know that some events aren't going to happen, and new character that you've never heard of before, is he going to survive or is she going to survive to the end of the novel? Because
yes,
they
yeah.
are completely disposable in some ways, and you kind of takes the edge off some poignant scenes when for a sacrifice or an unexpected death, and it's like, well, it might be unexpected, but is it really? We've never
Yeah,
heard of this
yeah.
Fremen before. Something like this.
And where were they this whole time? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree. I think if I had any critique, it does take a little bit of the tension out with some of these newer characters that you've never seen before, or even like decisions that are telegraphed because yeah, we know how it ends up. But I think if you've never read Dune or you're new and you've only watched, the latest part 1 movie, right? You have no idea what's going to happen. So it could be a little bit more thrilling. That being said, I thought that some of those poignant scenes were nice, even if it didn't like hit me as emotionally as I think maybe it was intended. Because they gave us a lens into funeral rites, grieving processes, and things that we've seen a little bit of, especially on the Fremen side in later novels. But I don't know. I kind of liked the glimpses of how things are done, you know, canonically.
And you mentioned funeral rites there, and that's something that we've seen before for the Fremen with Janice's funeral. Uh, but we also see the Guild doing a funeral rite as well, which is a surprising start to the novel. But for me, it was a sort of a plot point that just sort of drifted away and came back at the end. It felt like it should have been more, particularly with its prominence at the start. And that the funeral scene also introduces or weaves in characters, I should say, from some of the other prequel novels as well, which was a nice tie-in. But as I say, I felt the guild story was almost an afterthought that was sort of tacked in the middle of the end and a bit in the middle. It just didn't gel for me.
It did feel like there was maybe another scene that was cut and maybe saved for another novel.
Mhm.
Um, that, that's kind of how it did feel like I was waiting for a chapter to pop up about the conclusion of that arc, and it never really happened. Um, yeah, you pointing that out made me realize that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was interesting from the perspective of getting more lore about the guild, because apparently that's we see the funeral of one of the guild navigators, and that's the first time ever that the Emperor and Irulan are witnessing that, and they're like special guests, and this is something that normally they would have never seen. So it was a great honor that the guild was bestowing on them in this case, and even then they didn't get to see the whole process as well. And then as Mark, you were mentioning at the beginning, we have that the end of that funeral process, I guess, where they basically dump the guild navigator's body into a spice flow. So like it's returning to where it came from in a sense. So that was a really intriguing. Well, would love to see that, like, if it was filmed on cinema.
Yeah, and it's also intriguing because it connects to Liette, right? And because they're both sort of interested in different sides of the spice kind of process. So that was a good parallel. Fitting, I guess. Weird. I would never have guessed that, given what I know of the guild, but fitting.
And then yeah, then we see that the Tleilaxu also figure into this story. So
Always, they're always
but,
there, skulking in the background somewhere or doing something.
yeah, because as mentioned, like that plot sort of, it does seem like a third plot that doesn't, it doesn't go into as depth as the other, but yeah, like the body of the guild navigator is taken away at the last moment, and then that sort of, there's some investigation going on at the side, but really we only get the conclusion towards the end when like the Tleilaxu base is discovered. But yeah, like it's really interesting to see how the Tleilaxu, they're always like trying something. It's like like bring someone back from the dead, or they're trying to create something new and like gain power in some ways. But
Yeah. And the description of that was a little horrible. Like it's just like things in tanks, things
Yeah.
growing, things looking into your eyes, and just kind of being like, "Kill me!" Like a little bit of just a drop of a horror scene, just there in the end.
Yeah, we've never really got much of the Tleilaxu on screen. There was a Max Avery's recently uncovered David Lynch's Dune Messiah script, and that would have had the Tleilaxu, and I'd have loved to see Lynch's take on that, because that just seems a match made in heaven,
Totally,
or
I could
hell,
read that
depending on your point
article.
of view. But yeah, maybe we'll get to see more of the Tleilaxu in Villeneuve's universe. Fingers crossed on that as well.
I mean, I think we've gotten like the weirdest ways that it can happen with the spider person and
Yeah.
that I guess is supposed to be Wana. I don't know. I think that's a theory that people have. Seems weird to me, but um yeah, like just everything's just off, just put together wrong, little horrific to look at. Yeah, and but again, that plot with the Tleilaxu, it's like we kind of know it can't go anywhere because they're not really ready yet, right? They're still kind of cooking up their plots. They can't be suddenly able to rival the guild with, during the plot of Dune. So I kind of knew that wasn't gonna roll.
yeah, it has been something that sort of has been going through these prequel books, because also in the earlier House trilogy, we saw that the Tleilaxu were involved in actually helping the previous emperor try to find an alternative to the spice. But of course, like that's something that didn't bear fruit yet. But yeah, they're definitely always doing something. Like
Yeah, and we get a little glimpse of their home world. Um, just just for funsies, which was good with the confrontation between them and the guild at the end. They show up and they're like yelling at them. I love anytime any of the guild members would show up to yell at someone or provide them with a scroll and sarcastically read it was a good time. they just have so much power. They have no respect for anyone. They just they just come up and they're like, yeah, this is how it's gonna be. I know it's not fair. I don't care. What are you gonna do? Tell me no? No, of course
Yeah.
not. So they're just
And
super OP.
that does also sort of play into the discussions in the Dune community about, why don't the guild just claim Arrakis for themselves? And there's lots of reasons why that's the case. Partly because it would be a boring story if they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, the guild, when they throw the weight around, can be quite fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. It's for plot reasons, but I
Yeah.
think the way that they use religion throughout, right? It's there's almost a disregard for religion when you read Dune because it's often set up as, well, this was created to control a specific group of people, but then you have groups like the Guild who clearly have a religious order that they follow, even though they know everything. So I like the tension that they put there as well, because it does make it seem like, not everyone is very logically motivated. They do things because it feels right or because they follow a tenet that makes them do that. And so, yeah, maybe they just have a great respect for Arrakis and they don't want to just occupy it. Um, Even though they seem to know exactly how it all works.
Yeah, although that's a good point. They do seem to treat it almost as a religious aspect in terms of the spice and the worms and that being part of their cycle. And I thought that was fascinating, not only in this book, but also some of the earlier prequels, how we did get some insight into how the guild navigators come about and like how difficult it is to become a guild navigator, like going through the test, because we hear about this Tirlo, one of the star guides, and he's apparently the great grandson of the guild navigator who's died. But like uh, after his great grandfather became like a guild navigator, like no one else in his family was able to succeed anymore. He became a star navigator, which is an important position, but he didn't pass the test to become a guild navigator, and even his sister died during that test. So it's really shows how it's very rare. Like in the same way, I guess it's parallel in some way to creating the ultimate human, the Quizzus Haderach, in the same way to a lesser extent. Becoming a guild navigator, that's a really rare occurrence, and it's you have to be, I guess, a peak human to be able to succeed at that test.
Yeah, we have
Absolutely.
seen that in one of the prequel books. I forget which one, but there's two brothers and they both sort of go the tests, and one of them passes and one of them sort of rejects the spice, if you like, and is unable to become a navigator. So that is certainly something of the lore that Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert have expanded on into sort of this weird aspect of Dune. Probably we don't really get proper aliens in Dune. They're all human based. The Tleilaxu and the Guild are sort of those weird extremes of human evolution. Um, that they are quite alien in that regard.
Essentially doing the same thing with different tools, right? Like
Yeah,
one is all biological, one is sort of technological, where they're messing around with things. Um, and I guess if you were Denis, then the guild rep behind me would maybe be what is going around and talking to people and making proclamations and somebody who's sort of on the path to being a navigator but not quite there yet, so they require spice, but they're still maybe a little weird looking, but not enough to scare
yeah.
anyone. It was surprising to me, and I have not read that. I know about the novels about the two brothers, one becoming a navigator and one not. But it was surprising to me that they were almost that open with how the differences, because I had assumed that a lot of those things were secret. And I mean, I guess like if you're the emperor and his children, you get to see things that the regular folks wouldn't get to see. Um, but I guess it's also plot reasons, right? They want to show us the reader, so we get to witness.
In the original Dune book, Paul, when they're on the Highliner, Paul wants to go and try and see a navigator, and Leto says, "Yeah, don't do that. We'll get kicked out of the Imperium if you try that." So there's obviously this huge secrecy around the guild navigators themselves. The prequel books have kind of peeled that back a little bit. So, the Emperor does and Irulan do go to the funerals, and more people do sort of seem to know what's going on and can kind of sneaking in and around and know some of their
And
secrets.
shaking hands with guildsmen, just reaching out and touching
Yeah.
flesh. That's like, what? um, yeah. Seems to me like they should all be encased
Yeah.
so that you can't see how different they are. I know, I think it's in the house books where they talk about how the Bene Gesserit all also wear secret contacts so that you can't tell that they also have the eyes of the Ibad, the blue within blue, indicating spice addiction.
Yeah.
So there, there's lots of little details like that that, I makes me feel like, oh, all of the changes that spice makes at a certain level are secret.
Yeah.
I guess unless you're the emperor.
I don't know how much of the context is just to sort of cover up some plot holes, because in the first Dune book, Mohammed is speaking to Paul, the Gone the Jar test about Chani, and Paul says, she's got these bright blue eyes, and he doesn't say like yours.
Right, right.
So it's clear that the Reverend Mother doesn't have blue within blue eyes as she appears to Paul, and yet later on we discover that she's a truthsayer, and so
Mhm.
technically should have those
She
eyes.
should, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's just hiding it. And there
Yeah.
must be an advantage to hiding that because otherwise people would know that, that you have this weakness or, yeah.
Well, Frank hadn't decided that
Yeah.
Reverend Mothers would have blue eyes at that point. Yeah.
Well, that's true, right? We're sort of expanding on, like when I said that some of the lore contradicts itself,
Yeah.
especially in those early novels. We just kind of go for it, and I think that's one of the things that drew me to Dune in the first place. Is so much is so weird and just never explained. And then the prequels sort of fill in those holes. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's a little like I didn't want to know that. I didn't need to know how that happened. But I think in terms of Princess of Dune, it's not because those characters, it's like sifting sands, right? Those characters are not, we know where they end up. So there are rules, but we can kind of play with what goes on between those 2 points in time. And so we get to expand upon their character if it's not, even if their actions are not impacting the overall plot as much.
Okay, it's one of the traps of the prequels is you try and explain everything. So, you've got the Indiana Jones uh, ones where it's like, that's how he gets his whip, that's how he gets his scar, that's how he
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
his hat. All of that happens in 10 minutes. And it's like, did Indiana Jones not do anything else for the next 20 years or something? And like you also get that in the prequel books with the Bene Gesserit, with a lot of the Sisterhood of Dune, with a lot of their discoveries take place in a generation. Like, well, what happens for the next 89 generations of this breeding plan?
Horticulture. Yeah.
Everything's sorted out in the first generation, and we're just waiting after that. So you understand why they're doing it, but at the same time, it's kind of like everything doesn't need to be explained. I
Well,
agree.
the actual time spans of things in the Dune universe tends to be a little absurd, right? 10 million years. It's like, is that necessary? And we've gotten there in like 5,000 years. I don't know. So, but I guess if you're creating the Kwisatz Haderach, it takes time.
If you had a computer, it'd be fine. But
Yeah. If you had a computer, you could have done this in like maybe 3 generations, but I decided just wetware only.
And the Bene Gesserit weren't really like a huge focus of this book, but of course we have the key characters. We know that Princess Irulan, she is trained as Bene Gesserit. We see that some of her sisters end up going to the school for shorter or for longer periods. We see Lady Margot, and we see Reverend Mother Mohayim. So Rachel, what was your impression of the Bene Gesserit overall in this novel specifically?
I think that they were kind of like spiders in the corner, right? Definitely manipulating and pulling strings, but we don't get to see it because we're in the point of view of people who are themselves being manipulated. Um, but we know that they are. I really love Chalice and her just complete inability to deal. And then they like ship her off to Wallach 9. And then she's like, this is too hard. They want me to read. They want me to like exercise in the morning. And like, no, I'm going back to the palace because all I want to do all day is like eat Cheetos and like watch Cartoon Network or whatever it is that she does. I loved her as a character. She was hilarious. I felt bad for her because she was clearly just not cared for. Like her sister cared about her, but it didn't seem like her father did very much. Um, So I liked getting into that sort of like the Bene Gesserit as a noble boarding house, right? Because we knew Irulan is trained. We know that Jessica's trained. So we have all of these like noble characters who have been trained as Bene Gesserit and have all these abilities and are really smart and they are useful spies and know everything about everything. But there's also just people that get shipped off to the Bene Gesserit school and just kind of suck at it. and that made it a little bit more relatable for me because I would never make it. I would never make it. Um, yeah. I liked and Mohiam coming in and just kind of like giving little tendrils of information to move people from one room to the next. And even I loved the scene where she's speaking with Irulan in the garden room in the Fenring's palace. And the butterfly comes and like lands on her face and she ignores it and the symbolism of that and it felt very cinematic. It felt like something I could have seen in one of the new movies, right? It's dark. You can feel like the dripping of the water and like the butterfly going by with like a dramatic piece of light just like slashing over her face or something. So she's there. She knows everything. But she's not a main character in this book because if she was, then it her presence I think would overwhelm others, like the new people.
Yeah, we've also got House Harkonnen as well, and they're kind of they're trapped in the middle between the Empire, House Carino, and the Fremen, um, taking hits from both sides on Arrakis, and that was kind of fun just to see the Baron suffering a little bit. As you say, they're minor characters as well in the background, just there for
Yes,
plot
House
reasons more than
Harkonnen
anything.
as as yeah, comedic relief, I guess, because they just come in, get punched, get like made fun of, outmaneuvered constantly, and all they care about, all he cares about is he's essentially committing tax fraud with his spice, right? So that's all he cares about. He's like, oh God, they're gonna look at the books. Do we have good books? Are our books like let's point them down there, and then you run that way and get the other books and swap those. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, we also see hints at, or yeah, always indications of Raban's incompetence there. Like, so he, the Fremen are like infiltrating Kartag and Arrakeen, and then like Raban actually he does uncover, like the plots going on, but then like he lets the Fremen get away, and then it's the Imperial forces who are actually able to catch them later on, and that they're surprised, and you feel both the Baron and Raban like they're sweating in front of the Emperor. Like yeah, I think it's really embarrassing moments for them as well in this book. Like
Arrakis as vacation, like sure. Shaddam's like, let me think. Where do I want to go? I know. I would love to talk about Wensicia because she's that scene that she has where she's been sort of Irulan Jr. up until this point, right? Like just unlucky to have been born in the wrong order. So she doesn't get to do all the fun stuff. She's like the backup kid. And we know that she ends up being really arch and ambitious later on. So we see those inklings of her character. And I loved the scene between her and Mako where he thinks that he's got the upper hand and she's like, actually, dude, I've got the upper hand. And she's just so happy. She's so thrilled with herself that she's figured it out and she's gonna just get him. I loved that for her.
Yeah, that particular plot device was a little bit convenient, I think. But yes, it certainly made for an interesting confrontation between them. But yeah, I mean, I had the problem when I was reading it. I was just imagining a young Susan Sarandon
Oh,
for her character because that's the only visual we've got of her is from the Children of Dune miniseries, um, where she's an excellent villain.
yeah,
And so,
they aged her up for that. Yeah.
yeah, she's meant to be the younger sister, but you're not going to turn down Susan Sarandon when she wants to appear in the Dune miniseries.
Yeah, you're right. It was super convenient. And also, like, the first question anybody would ask is, what are those codes? And can I also have them? Sort of seems like it just kind of like went off into the ether. But like, maybe that points to this kind of overarching theme of the incompetence of the Imperial Navy, right? Where
Yeah.
people just don't know the manuals about their own ships. Um, that happens a lot, actually, right? Like people don't know who's standing behind them on the bridge. People don't know where people go at night and who they know or who their friends are. And yeah, uh, they're definitely ripe for conquering, I think, at this moment in Shaddam's history. And they keep saying, "Oh, well, the Corrinos have ruled for 10,000 years or whatever, and stability is important." And then other people say, "Well, yeah, but that's fine. Stability is from like a macro point of view, isn't you. It's just the same people doing the same thing forever. We don't need you to do that. We've got plenty of other people that can do that." So,
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. The lack of the AI, like that type of technology, the universe, no computers. It does sort of make sense that they've gone back to this feudal setup, and even like a world like Titan that it's has all this splendor and modernity. That knowledge does get lost. That's
mhm.
it's been 10,000 years, and like from one emperor to another, and like each of them have had a very long reign because they lived longer because of the spice. So I guess it does make sense in a way that there are all these secrets that are being put together, and probably like a lot of these records are still held, like in libraries, and you have to actually go and dig into things as Wensicia was doing to find out about this information.
Yeah, yeah. And then she took that book and put it in her room and didn't share it with anyone else because she knew it gave her an advantage. I think we need more mentats. I think we need an army of mentats to
Yeah.
just collectively like know stuff because yeah, it seems like the mentats are few and far between.
Yeah, so yeah, it was great seeing a lot of cartoon. We got to see also on Arrakis a lot more of life on the siege, and as mentioned, we saw Chani and Jamis and their interaction. So it was yeah, also tying into what we've seen a bit more of in the film adaptation about how they knew each other and they had fought together before. So we got to see more of the Fremen, the Raziel raids, but we also got to see the character of Kuro, his Chinese half brother. So, what did you think, Rachel, about the interaction family on between Liat, Chani, and Kuro?
I think Koro was meant to be like the quintessential Fremen kind of character as a foil for Chani. Like, he was everything that she could be if she rejected the knowledge that her father offered her. Um, not just the ecological knowledge, but political knowledge and just kind of the how and why of where Arrakis is in the Imperium and why people are interested in it and why the Harkonnens are there. Because like the Fremen don't care. For them, it's a very cut and dry thing. Like the Harkonnens suck. They're enslaving us. They're stealing from us. Let's get rid of them. And Liat is like, well, yes, but I'm an agent of both places, and I understand the point of view of both. And so he's trying to impart that knowledge on Chani, and whether or not she accepts everything that he has to say, is part of her character. But Koro does reject everything that Liet has to say. He thinks that he's not a real Fremen. He blames him in a way, I think, for his own father's death because he was there uh, when that happened. And then he has to carry Liet's name, which he also hates. And then his Fremen name, which was supposed to be like a cyclone, like a sandstorm, also very symbolic of his position. So yeah, he's constantly pulling at Chani to be more Fremen, which I think would do her a little bit of a disservice knowing what's coming for her, and what she's going to have to be dealing with.
He's one of the minor characters that I've kind of forgotten a little bit about. As you're talking about him, bits of it are coming back, but yeah, he's, as you say, he's very much the foil for Cheney in this. She's he's one of the paths that she can take. She can follow her father's path, or she can follow Harper's path.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, with Cheney becoming effectively, empress of the universe, that that power, that knowledge of the Imperium, all the lessons that her father taught her are going to become very important for her future life.
Yeah, just being able to hold the duality within herself and
Mhm.
be okay with that and navigate it. I mean, absolutely essential for what's coming for her. She's I mean, yeah, she still wants to go out and knife people and fight and like, be a cool Fremen in the desert, and like look at all the sand and look at the sky and be like, yeah, this is it. This is the vibe. But she doesn't really get to do that later on. She's got to navigate all this stuff. Um, most of it put there by Irulan, right? So it's like it's cool to kind of like see her in her training grounds versus Irulan's training grounds
Mhm.
and how that serves them later. Um, yeah, Koro, I knew kind of like, oh, well, he's not in Dune. He's not gonna make it, or he's not important, or he's gonna end up somewhere where it doesn't matter. So, like in that way, his arc didn't get me as much, but as like a way for Chani to have like a physical embodiment of the struggle within her, I thought he was kind of a clever use.
Yeah.
Even if it does feel like we're constantly populating the Duniverse with just more and more characters who seem to have intimate connections to our main characters that we've never heard of before.
Yeah, well, it's the same in the Star Wars as well, isn't it? There's always a half brother or a twin sister or a
Yeah,
granddaughter that
exactly.
you've never heard of before
It's
that
like, "Oh,
pops
I
up.
knew your father, and here's a spin-off that explains how," even though I've never mentioned it.
Yeah, and I guess it was interesting seeing his perspective though, because when we read the original novel, it feels like Liet is like he's widely respected and seen as a prophet himself across all the Fremen. But with Quirrell, like he actually like hated Liet from one angle. I mean, he respected him, but also like he blamed Liet for his own father's death. And although he sees him as a father figure, at the same time he resents him. That's because of the incident where his father died. So that was interesting. Like, and he actually dares to challenge Liet also in front of other Fremen as well. So there was that tension that was was almost shocking in a sense when you've only seen from the perspective of Liet being this almost this this religious leader almost among the Fremen who is he's bringing them towards their promised land of transforming the whole planet.
But I think that's good too, because the Fremen can often be written off as this kind of ignorant population that's being controlled with religion, that just doesn't know that they're being controlled. But Koro kind of represents the thinking Fremen, right? And like we may disagree with him. We may think this is a terrible idea, what this no plan, this half plan that you thought about for 12 seconds to go and get yourself like in trouble and arrested. Um, but it's nice to think that, okay, even if you're a person of religious influence in the Fremen community, you still have your opponents. Um, they're not just going to blindly do what you say just because it's, connected to their religion, which I liked because kind of that characterization of the Fremen as this like ignorant indigenous population can be problematic. So it kind of brings it forward and helps develop them a little bit.
Okay, so I think let's do a round table. So I actually like looking through this book. I also read it more recently. That there is actually a lot of interesting moments that's stayed with me. So let's do a round table. And what was your highlight from the book? So Mark, I'll start with you.
I think one of my favorite parts is where Koro, no, not Koro, Moko, has to make that decision to disobey a direct order from his superior but woefully inept commander. And that scenario that was constructed for the novel, I thought worked very well. Was well set up and felt um, realistic, if you like, as opposed to hidden secret codes for a backdoor on all the starships. So I liked that scene, and I liked his setup as taking command of a rebellion almost by accident. That was one of my favorite scenes right at the start.
My one of my favorite scenes, I think, was I enjoyed a lot more of the stuff happening on the Carino side than I did on Chani's side. I think that there was just more happening and a little bit like more characters on that end because that's where Mako was. Um, as I said, I loved the confrontation between Wensicia and Mako. But I think in terms of like the Arrakeen scenes, I really enjoyed when Chani got to speak with the shutout mates because it was more of like a highlight of like, this is, you have an opportunity here, and you need to use it. And I think that, again, Chani's only 14 in this book. She had to do a little bit of growing up. So I thought that was a really useful scene with the iconic character. Uh, but yeah, I like the space stuff was just fun. Anytime anybody got to knife somebody in the neck and do insurrection and be like, actually, I'm doing this for the for the Imperium. You're bad, and I still the kind of like stuff. I don't know. It was just funny and very like, it felt like an RPG to me. Like that somebody was just like playing in the Dune universe. It's like, who are you going to be? Well, I'm going to be a rebel commander. I liked it.
Yeah, I think for me, the moment that really stood out was also towards the end of the book, and it happens on Arrakeen. So uh, Shani and Kuro and Jamis and I think about 20 or more other Fremen have been captured, and basically they've been arrested for like the plot to assassinate the emperor who's there at the time, and it's pretty clear, like as for the policy, that they're going to be executed um, within a few days. And yeah, Leah learns about that, and he goes to Erkin, and he talks to Princess Irulan, and he appeals to her. And then we see like Irulan, she talks to Reverend Mother Mohai, gets advice for her. But in the end, it's her decision, what's going to happen there, and she takes the decision to release all of them, and like with no consequences for them, that they can go free. And it's I mean, the position she's in, like she's not going to face too much repercussions. I mean, of course, she probably gets a slap on the wrist from the emperor, but like she's not like in any danger because of that. But the way that she made the decision, that has a long impact down the road, because then the Fremen, they're realizing that, okay, like it's actually maybe the emperor and House Greeno aren't that bad, and we see that they're grateful that they're released, they're alive. So I thought that was interesting, but just by taking that decision, maybe it wasn't a huge consequence for Irulan herself, but she took charge. She did the decision that she thought was right, and in some way that had positive impacts on Fremen and their perception of House Credo.
But it did have a huge impact on her life because she inadvertently moved Chani back onto the board, and
Yeah,
she becomes an obstacle for her later. Um, yeah, I think that's some of those like near miss, you know, misses. It's like we know they don't meet, but here's how they impacted each other.
yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
I wonder if she ever does realize that, like I thought she'll be going.
She gets close because she was like, "Oh, one of them was a servant. She was posing as a servant in the house." Like, yeah, do you have a file? Do you want to look at that later? Uh, it does seem absolutely impossible that they would just be let go with no consequences. But such is the impact of Liette, right? We can't underestimate how charismatic Liette was.
Yeah, and it shows that Irulan is trying to be a more thoughtful leader than her father, who rules with an iron fist, and any problem just needs to send the Sardaukar after them. Seems to be his policy. And Irulan is aware of the politics and the repercussions for every decision, and will try and balance that for the greater good. So it's a shame that she wasn't able to take a more active role in the Imperium earlier in the story.
Yeah, she's just totally been put on ice, right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess we're just supposed to think, oh, she was studying for this entire time. But she has so many skills. Like, again, she uses poison at the end, right? Which we know is her weapon of choice. And she she has absolutely no qualms about it. She doesn't feel anything about it. She doesn't. Whereas I feel like when Chani is shown to be killing people, she's positioned as like a little bit regretful or at least honoring of like the life she's taking, right? Like with the Tleilaxu, like abominations. She kind of feels bad for them, even, in a way. But Irulan doesn't feel bad about killing people. Nope.
Right, so let's go ahead and do like our planet conclusions. So would you recommend this book? Final thoughts? Start with you, Rachel.
Would I recommend this book? Yeah, I think I would. I think if you enjoy the prequels, you're going to enjoy this. It's it centers two of the best female characters in the Dune universe, and when they're younger, so they get to do more. I think that the Imperial kind of Navy plot is really fun. You do get glimpses into the guild, although we have decided that maybe it's not as satisfying a glimpse. Um, yeah, I recommend it. I think that I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed like the House books for sure.
And Mark, you wrote a full written review on DUNIVERSE.com, so we know that you gave it the good score. Any further thoughts?
No, just echoing what everyone said. Really, it's a nice standalone book. It's only one book, so you're not having to commit yourself to a trilogy. It features some important characters, but isn't so overloaded with all the background that you need to have read 15 other books before you start this book. So if you're looking for a quick read, an enjoyable read set in the Dune universe, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier on, like I think this works for both I guess the new fans and people who have read Dune already for a longer time, because it does expand on characters about from the book. Gives you more time with characters that you wish had more time in the original novel. So from that aspect, it works really well. And then from the new fans who or maybe they haven't even read the book and they're just coming into the movie, and this offers a tie-in in a way. I still recommend that they read the Dune book first, but even if not, I think this is a great tie-in to the current.
Yeah, I have two comments about that. One, I think that both of the characterizations of them sort of are in line with the way that they've been portrayed in the new films. And my second point is that if you look in the acknowledgments of this book, they specifically call out what was then called what the Sisterhood of Dune and is now called the Dune Prophecy. About how they were writing this book while they were thinking about making that show and those decisions. So it could be that the themes that are explored in this novel are going to be similar to the themes explored in that season, depending. I mean, we know it's changed a little bit since then, but this is what was in their minds when they were working on the spin-off series. So I think it's a great thematic and kind of vibey piece if you are enjoying the new film universe.
That's a good point that you brought up in terms of Dune prophecy, because I can imagine with the royal sisters like going to the mother school on Wallach 9. I can
Yeah.
imagine that's going to be like hinting at what could be in the Dune TV series with the sisterhood. I'm sure we're going to have some representation from the royal family, and we know that the sisters who founded the school are Harkonnens sisters. So there's the Bene Gesserit and how they're formed, and the interaction with all the different noble houses and the House Carino as well.
And those interactions with like the sibling rivalry and two ambitious sisters sort of working in tandem and then maybe sometimes against each other is probably, yeah, maybe what we're going to be seeing. Hopefully, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I've said that here on the show. I'm really looking forward to the TV series, maybe even more so than the movies, just because it's a fresh
It's
story,
new.
it's an opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's it. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the show over here. So yeah, it was great talking Chris to Dune, diving into this book, touching on the expanded lore. Yeah, let's go ahead and sign off. Rachel, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really fun. You can find me on Instagram at Darth_Rachel, where I post mostly about the costuming that I make, like this guy. And if you like my takes on stuff, you can find me at Buckkeep Radio. That's where we've read the entire series of Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. You can also find me on Fire and Lunch, which is a Game of Thrones pod. And I have another pod called Read This Book that is just books, trade recommendations between me and another host. And most of it is science fiction and fantasy.
I'm glad to be back and another great podcast. Thank you to Rachel for joining us. Great to meet you finally in real life. If anyone wants to follow me, I'm Dune Info on all the socials.
Yeah, and this was Marcus Gabriel, your editor at DUNETNet.com. Find me writing at DUNETNet.com and on at DUNETNet, posting various updates on the movie news. So yeah, we're approaching the movie, a lot coming up, so you can look forward to more news, reviews, and interviews. Until then, take care.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.